On Saturday, a far-right politician burned a copy of the Quran in front of the Turkish embassy in Stockholm. Before setting fire to the Muslim holy book, Rasmus Paludon gave an hour-long speech against Islam and immigration and called his act a small stand for freedom of expression against Turkey. Sweden approved the protest despite Ankara's appeals, and the reaction was swift. Calling the demonstration vile and Islamophobic, Turkey cancelled the planned visit by Sweden's defence chief. The meeting was meant to dispel Ankara's objections to Sweden's NATO bid. The Nordic country applied to join the alliance after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But political ramifications aside, should the protest have been allowed in the first place? Where does freedom of speech end and hate speech begin? Is freedom of speech absolute?
So let's get to it. Is freedom of speech absolute? As always, we begin with our quickfire round, 30 seconds each to let your initial stance on the matter, and we'll pick up the conversation from there. So, Mr. Glaser, please take the lead.
Hi, good evening, all. Freedom of speech is not absolute. I think any reasonable person can draw a line. Some things are very obvious, child pornography, advertisements for illegal products, things like that. But the expression of an idea is not an action. That's part of the problem that we have here.
Mr. Sommarstrom, your 30 seconds are on.
Thank you so much. I won't give my own opinion now because I'm a journalist and supposed to report about others, but I will tell about the Swedish judiciary system. And no, it's very far-reaching, but it's not absolute. We have certain laws, as you were talking about, child pornography, for example. It's not allowed, of course, as not even incitement to hate against certain groups, not allowed. So no, it's far, but it's not absolute.
Last but not least, Dr. Yanarocak, your take?
Well, as an Israeli Jew, I would like to quote the Jewish poet Heinrich Heine. Where they burn books, in the end, they will also burn people, human beings. So in my opinion, what we have seen in Sweden, unfortunately, is a hate crime, and the Swedish judiciary legitimized by approving it. I think they legitimized this horrific act.
Okay, and on that note, gentlemen, let's please feel free to interact from this point onwards, and allow me to begin by asking, did Swedish authorities make a mistake facilitating this protest? Mr. Sommarstrom, please begin.
Well, I have to say that the Swedish authorities or the Swedish politicians are very well separated from the Swedish judiciary system, which approves this kind of events in Sweden. So even if the Swedish politician, and I'm sure that they didn't want to see this event outside the Turkish embassy yesterday, they didn't want to see it, but they don't have any say in this. It's the judiciary system who stands alone and give the approval, and it's always been like this. And here is the big collision, you can say, with Turkey, for example.
So, Professor Glaser, Sweden is criticizing the burning of the Quran as a provocation, but defending its decision to allow the planned act to go along. So is it a sort of a situation that if you don't see the bad, you can acknowledge the good type of a thing?
It takes a little more unpacking than that. I think first off, the Swedish officials, their comments, I think, were appropriate and responsible. They decried what was inappropriate, the burning of the Quran, burning books. I'm quoting the Swedish Prime Minister, burning books that are holy to many is a deeply disrespectful act, and I want to express my sympathy to all Muslims who are offended. Well, that's fine. At the same time, and this is where the unpacking matters, in Sweden, the Constitution guarantees extensive rights to view their public, in public, to view their things. Incitement to violence or hate speech isn't allowed. We all agree on that. So you have a law. The question is, how is that law interpreted? And I don't know that this burning of the Quran, which is disrespectful and it's obnoxious, it's happened here, in the United States and elsewhere. It doesn't seem clear to me that that is an act of violence, and it is that's the problem. Is we are too easily blurring the line between speech, give me that coat, or speech that is really action. Give me that coat, or I will shoot.
I will, yeah. Dr. Yanarocak, excuse me. I want to circle back to my opening question. Is the risk of allowing the burning of the Quran greater than banning it?
Well, as far as I think, in a broader sense, yes, because the ramifications would be very dangerous for also the public peace. As we all know, after such an incident, other people, other Muslims, may felt offended, may felt attacked, and they may seek to take revenge. So this is very irresponsible. This Swedish politician must be condemned. He must not get any kind of legitimization from the Swedish authorities, and I think this is really disgraceful. Really disgraceful.
But Paludon state it's not his first rodeo here. This far-right Danish politicians who operate in Sweden. He is clearly stating that his goal is to create such provocation in order to provoke violence, and then say, "Yeah, you see, I told you so." So it is somewhat counter-conducive here on behalf of the critics. Question being, are extremists taking advantage or seeking refuge under the auspices of freedom of speech, Mr. Sommarstrom?
Yes, no doubt about it. And I mean, this guy, Mr. Paludon, for example, is a small fish when it comes to being a politician. He's a really, really extreme right-wing politician. In the last election in Sweden, he had like 1,000 voters. That is not many in a country where 7 million can go and cast their votes. Yeah. But he's successful in that way that we are sitting here and talking about him right now. And Mr. Erdogan was talking about him yesterday, and all the world is talking about him now. So I mean, he knows what he needs to do to draw attention to himself.
But Dr. Yanarocak, is Islamophobia to an extent more tolerable in the sense that there's a double standard when it comes to the Quran?
I think this is really problematic. We all see that the Swedish politician exploited this prejudice for the immigrants in his own society, and by setting fire the Holy Quran, he sought to get the support of the people. But I think this should not be. I mean, he should not basically do this, and I think this is totally unacceptable.
Professor Glazer.
Well, briefly, we have to take a little more historical view. Is there? Forget the double standard question for the moment, but the key problem here, and with all due respect to my colleague up there, Professor, is that we are assuming improperly, as a legal matter, we are assuming a concatenation, a connection between the offensive speech and the action. And what happens is the fear of retribution, and I understand that, the fear of retribution, the fear of violence, the fear of, oh my God, people are going to flip out and set things on fire, cannot and should not ever be the basis for just blithely banning an obnoxious, clearly I agree, an obnoxious act. Very, very important thing for you to remember, for us to remember. In the turn of the 20th century, the socialists and anarchists in the United States distributed leaflets opposing our involvement in World War I. They went to jail and they were deported. And it took a long time for jurisprudence to say, wait a minute. You cannot hold a publisher or a journalist or even a protester responsible for the acts of some idiot out there. I mean, this has been proven in many different ways. Perfect example, tragedy in New York. Some fella, a bad guy, he shoots a police officer, and they discover that he was listening to rap music, right?
Okay.
Kill the police, shoot the police. And they tried, to sue the record company.
To connect the dots here, yeah.
You can't do it.
But maybe, Professor Glaser, holy books should be excluded from the freedom of expression protection.
Well, to begin with, that wouldn't work in the United States and in most countries because of the separation of church and state. And an interesting point here, and this is why I say there's the law and the way it's interpreted. Having worked on my book, I've read the Turkish constitution, and interestingly enough, they, on paper, respect no one shall be compelled to worship or participate in religious rites, ceremonies, or beliefs. In other words, they claim to be a secular country. Now, we've seen Erdogan for years try to have it both ways. But we cannot make a special exception for religious books. Why? That's a slippery slope.
These are sacred books. And people do believe in them, and this is very sensitive. This is a very sensitive issue, I think. And I think that there should be a boundary for that. I mean,
yes, I agree, but the boundary can't be, you hurt my feelings, you offended me. The fact is, there have been holy books for centuries. And in India, if you criticize the Gita, right, on television, there could be riots. I mean, this is not a unique situation. And
yet a recurring one, Dr. Yanarocak.
I believe that your point of view is very ethnocentric because you're judging other cultures with Western values. I mean, I think this is the problem. I mean, and we are trying to impose our Western values for the whole humanity. I think this is the huge problem in some societies. Burning of Quran or burning of the Old Testament or the New Testament should not be acceptable. I totally believe that this should not be acceptable.
You're entitled to that belief, but the fact of the matter is that this is not an ethnocentric or Western view. My specialty is international law. I'm basing my concepts on European Court of Human Rights decisions.
Okay, gentlemen, hold your thoughts right there because we do need to take a very short break, but obviously we have so much more to unpack right after it. So Professor Glaser, Mr. Sommarstrom, and Dr. Yanarocak, you're staying with us. A few minutes of a break, and we're back with the summit. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Dr. Eytan Cohen Yanarocak, Mr. Johan-Mathias Sommarstrom, and Professor Charles Glaser. Thank you, gentlemen, so very much for staying with us. We're also staying on topic, but before we dive back into our conversation, let's take a quick listen to the Turkish Foreign Minister.
Now in Sweden, this madman has insulted our religion Islam and our holy book, the Quran, and has committed such actions before. This is a racist act. It is also a hate crime. When we heard this news, we took the necessary steps. We called Sweden's ambassador to Ankara to our ministry yesterday. We made the necessary warning. Our ambassador in Stockholm met directly with the Swedish Foreign Minister, Tobias Billström, and conveyed our thoughts on the matter. No one can call this freedom of thought. Today, they do not allow the burning of another religion's book. But when it comes to the Quran and Islamophobia, they immediately say freedom of expression and freedom of thought. Hate crime and racism are not freedom of thought. It is not according to Swedish law, nor is it according to the decisions of the Council of Europe. According to the European Court of Human Rights rulings, hate crime and racism are not freedom of thought and freedom of expression.
So before we go back to our debate on the more philosophical elements in this story, let's talk news and begin with a quick fire round, 30 seconds each. Is it the end for Sweden's NATO bid? Mr. Sommarstrom, please take the lead.
Well, this is surely problematic for the already much problematic Swedish NATO bid, but I don't think it's the end. Right now, Turkey needs this to show that they are strong. They have an election campaign coming up. Erdogan needs to show that he's a strong man who can lead Turkey. I think Sweden is still in the NATO thoughts because of the geopolitical situation, and it will be maybe member next fall or next winter.
Yeah, sometimes you need to expand a problem in order to solve the initial problem. Dr. Yanarocak?
In terms of soccer terminology, I name this Swedish act as an own goal. I think the Swedish government provided a present for the Turkish government because the Turkish government is suffering from enormous pressure from Russia. And now they had this wonderful excuse to make it more problematic for the Swedish membership into NATO.
Last but not least, Professor Charles Glaser.
Well, I think Professor made a very good point there regarding the opportunity for making political hay out of this incident. 2 points are really worth remembering. This isn't the first time that Erdogan has used Islam or Islamic values as some sort of showpiece. When I was last in Turkey, he walked out of a basketball game. You might remember the FIBA game because there were cheerleaders. Oh my gosh, who were dressed, inappropriately. He made a big scene out of leaving.
So who would have thought religion being utilized for politics? Surprise, surprise. And please, let's feel free to interact from this point onward, gentlemen. And I do want us to go back to our earlier conversation. Should a state, any state, and Sweden and Turkey are good and somewhat opposing examples here, decide what is and what isn't acceptable speech? Dr. Yanarocak.
Well, this is very problematic because it's not the only burning of Quran. In the same political environment, we are also witnessing the pro-Kurdish PKK protests inside Sweden. And according to the European Union, PKK is considered as a terrorist entity. So by providing an approval for these demonstrations, again, the Swedish government, in Turkish eyes, is making another foul in terms of, again, in soccer terminology. So it's not only one headache. We are seeing two different headaches. One, it is very much touching to the nerves of the Turkish government because of this ethnicity issue, of the Kurdish issue, and the other one is the religious issue.
But, we also hear renewed threats on Charlie Hebdo for another satirical character of Prophet Muhammad, this time from Iranian direction. Is hurting one's feelings over religion simply too subjective, Mr. Sommarstrom?
Well, that isn't. Everybody would have a different answer on that question, of course. But religion is a very sensitive question, not at least in the Middle East or in Turkey, but in Sweden, the most secular country in the world, actually. Religion is not a big thing here. So, there are such a big difference when it comes to the culture, and not at least religion.
Professor Glaser, an amused Professor Glaser.
I am amused, and I think you're quite right. You're quite right, but the fact of the matter is that until cooler heads prevail, people are going to claim that these kind of, quote, acts, burning a Quran, burning an American flag, whatever it be, are violent. And both Sweden and Turkey, in their constitution regarding speech, do prohibit inciting offense, state secrets, riot or insurrection. But how do you define that? It's interesting, and I kind of leave you with this question. In the United States, there was a very well-reported contest, Draw Mohammed. You remember that? And where was Erdogan? Where was he? It didn't affect him. It had nothing to do with him. But where was he? When, when the radicals, and I use that word pointedly, murdered the journalist at Charlie Hebdo. Where was Erdogan? Where was he? What did he say? Did he march in sympathy with the reporters?
But Professor Glaser, do you understand the claim that freedom of speech itself is becoming a religion?
Well, I've been accused of that myself, but I don't think that's. Now you're into what is a religion? Is climate change a religion? Some people argue it is. I guess that's great cocktail discussion, but I don't think it gets us anywhere.
Well, where's the booze? Mr. Sommarstrom, can liberalism and religion live side by side?
Sorry, can you repeat that? There was a little glitch there.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether liberalism and religion live side by side.
If it lives side by side, well, if it could live, it's my firm belief that in some way, of course, it can. I mean, but it depends on how you use the liberalism and how you use the religion. I mean, as we see in Turkey now, we have more and more Islamism in the government, for example. You have more and more rules in the society that is based on religious rules, for example. Many Turks are so much against this because Turkish is supposed to be a secular country, but it's not anymore if you ask the general Turk.
Dr. Yanarocak, as we're nearing the end of our discussion, are such acts only driving Turkey and other Islamic countries further away from the West?
Well, of course, this is creating an alienation. The Turks are Muslims, and according to the latest surveys, they are becoming more and more pious Muslims. And whenever they are seeing such incidents that are taking place in the West, of course, it's very problematic. And it's also, it's basically question. It is very bad for the relations between Europe and Turkey. It's very problematic.
And in the short time we have left, Professor Glaser, is it an indication for the mere notion of multiculturalism collapsing?
I think that's going a little too far. There is indeed a pendulum swinging away from what some people call woke culture. But the door has been opened to multiculturalism in general, and we are respecting, all of us are learning inch by inch to respect others' feelings.
The clash of civilizations persists. Professor Charles Glaser, Mr. Johan-Mathias Sommarstrom, and Dr. Eytan Cohen Yanarocak. Thank you, gentlemen, so very much for your time and insight. It has been a pleasure.